he came to Liberty?
Yeah, he sure did. It was maybe about a year ago. Sometime within like the past academic year. But yeah, he came and our university president actually had like a shoot off with him, and believe it or not, our president actually made the shot, and Steph didn't. And then it's a big thing. You can see it online. Like it's
That's hilarious.
But yeah, he did that. And
were they playing knockout or was it just a shoot off?
It was literally just a shoot off for some money, if I remember correctly. I saw it on TV. I was working, but
that's funny.
But yeah, he was there. And
was he there for convocation or for just visiting campus or for what for?
Yeah, he was there just to mainly just talk to students. There for convocation. A fun convocation that we had, and there was also a nonprofit that was connected with it, and so it was kind of like a team up, type of opportunity where also students were able to bring in shoes and to give to people overseas, and not only was that very successful, but then also we just had some little fun banter and some shooting, and it was something that's casual. So it was
that's
fun.
Fantastic. I had no idea how big a deal shoes were until I started working with high school students, and at least over the last couple years, maybe this goes back a long time, but shoes are such a big thing for my high school students.
They are, and I'm not necessarily like 100% into shoes. Well, maybe in the past year or so, because of the office I work in, but for kids and for students, they will invest some major money.
Have you heard of these things called Yeezys?
I have.
Mm-hmm. Do you own a pair of Yeezys?
No, I don't.
Oh, I'm so glad you don't own a pair of Yeezys. I would have made so much fun of you if you owned Yeezys.
I just have other financial obligations I need to focus on first before I look into.
Don't we all? Shouldn't we all have things that we would rather sink $1,200 into rather than a pair of shoes?
Listen, if I had $1,200, let me tell you, it would go right to debt. But
that's right.
But again, there's other things, when you're 30, 31, and you're trying to still low key try to figure out life.
There's other things.
There's other things that do take priority for sure.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of What's the Res, an ongoing conversation about the current resolutions in the world of high school debate. My name is Josh Herring. I'm a humanities instructor and debate coach at Thales Academy in Rollsville, North Carolina. My guest this episode is Thomas Starchia. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thomas, it's been a few years since our paths have crossed for a good conversation.
It sure has. It's, we grew up together, and then, going to college, paths diverge, mm-hmm. But then, from time to time, we can get back together and catch up where we left off.
That's right. And at least in this weekend's conversation, I discovered that over the years, Thomas has become he's become a college professional in the sense that
we'll call it that.
There we go. Went to Liberty University,
yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you've had a variety of roles there, including an admissions counselor. Is that
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. So I graduated back in 2010. And then took a couple years, and then I started working full-time for the university, and I started in the admissions office and then worked my way through recruitment. And then most recently, in the past 2.5 years, I transitioned over to the Office of Spiritual Development, where I actually help and assist with the management of the executive guest house. But most of a lot of my experience, working professionally has been the world of admissions, recruitment, enrollment, particularly on the residential side, and that was for almost 5.5 years.
That's really helpful, in part because we're getting ready for the September-October Lincoln Douglas resolution that reads, in the United States, colleges and universities ought not use standardized tests for admissions decisions. Mm. So, Thomas, as a former admissions counselor, and certainly knowing that's not your role anymore, and you are in no way speaking on behalf of Liberty University or anything like that, but just from your background and working in admissions, help us think through the role of what do SAT or ACT scores play when a college admissions professional gets that application? What impact do the scores have on the admissions professional?
Well, I will first say that it really does depend upon the institution that you're looking to apply to. Different schools have different standards for admission, and even though you might hear like, hey, these are the minimum requirements. Yeah, they're exactly as that. As I say, they are the minimum requirements. It doesn't necessarily require, or it doesn't necessarily guarantee admission, to that school. So obviously, the higher GPA, the higher test scores, the better the chances. So I will say that. But it does depend upon what school you do attend and, what those policies are. And at least like in my experience, it can play a bit of a role, but it doesn't, but in some cases it doesn't necessarily, mean that, oh, this is like the only way, that you can get into schools. I mean, and I've heard a little bit about this in my time, why do different schools require, certain standard, certain standard score or whatever the case is. So I mean, it can kind of vary. I'll say this: it does vary. Depends upon, the school, the institution. But I always try to encourage people, do research. Do the research, like that's all like the behind the scenes kind of stuff. That way, hey, okay, well, here's what this school requires, and that's how it's different from this school. And okay, so here's how I can approach, this school when applying for college.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, do you think it would make a difference? I mean, if a school, an imaginary university, just suddenly got rid of the SAT or ACT and said, we don't care about those, would that make a difference to the rest of the student's application?
I think it can, because more than likely what that institution can do is take a look at other factors to see if that student can be successful at that institution. So other factors might include, your transcripts, whether it be from high school or from college or both. They can take a look at like an essay prompt. So I know there are a lot of schools that have like a prompt that they want you to write on, and so not only do they look at the grammar, not only do they look at the syntax, and but they also want to know, what do they really think about this prompt, and how they answer that particular prompt, and how eloquent of a writer you can be. So there might be other factors, but some schools may not necessarily require a test score. In some cases, in my line of work that I did, there were some circumstances where the score wasn't necessarily a requirement, but it could have been a supplement to their application or for their application for enrollment.
Okay. Now, without getting into any Liberty-specific policies, what kind of scenarios could you envision where the SAT or ACT score might not be necessary for an admissions decision?
All right. So, like, let's say, like, if there was someone who didn't necessarily go to college right after high school, let's say that they decided just to go and work for a period of time, and at a grocery store or at their family-owned business or something like that.
Sure.
Very well, what they could do is, let's say they might be like 24, 25, and they decide, what, I actually looking to go into college now, and so they go to like a community college for 2 years, and they receive an associate's degree. Well, because they have an associate's degree, they weren't necessarily required to submit, scores of an SAT or ACT. There's been other scenarios, like if they were to have, there might be like an age limit, or not necessarily a limit, but there might be a certain age. If they reach
someone's
a certain
21
age,
or 25.
21, 22, 20, depends upon what school.
Okay.
They might not necessarily be required to submit test scores. So there's all sorts of different kinds of scenarios, based upon what your experience is. If you did dual enrollment in high school, how many credits did you receive from that? There's all sorts of different scenarios.
I think you were describing something earlier whereby if students achieved a certain number of college credits in transfer, then suddenly the no one cares about their test scores anymore, because they look at those college credits really as demonstrating proficiency at being in college.
Yeah, so like they would take a look at like the GPA from your college, and so like 60 credit hours was that benchmark and or an associate's degree.
I
Was
see.
that benchmark.
Okay.
And some associate degrees have more than 60 credit hours. Whatever the scenario is. They didn't have to submit the test scores for that, but what they could do is they can submit the test scores if they did take it in high school, and that could actually help them as far as other academic scholarships. And they would do like best case scenario. So if it worked out in their favor that your high school GPA and your test score would help with an academic scholarship of like $5,000 or something like that per year versus your college credits, and let's say that let's say you did better. Let's say you did better in high school with your GPA and college test scores versus your college.
Sure.
Then they would take the best case scenario with the test scores as well as with the GPA and use that for your academic scholarship versus the other thing.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, then what it sounds like so if I'm a student applying and you receive my application, and if I'm in a slightly unique scenario where I've done some dual enrollment and I also took the ACT, as my admissions counselor, you could kind of take my application and basically assemble whichever version was the best version of mine. And if that did not include the test scores, then you would leave those out. And you'd be looking to kind of figure out what's the best way I can construct this student's application to show that he fits these criteria the university is looking for.
Right. We'll do it we've done it like that, and then I've seen it where we also want to find out, okay, what would be the best case scenario when it comes to scholarships as well. And so if we saw, based upon your entire admissions application, that includes like the paper application in of itself, the test scores, your high school GPA, your college GPA, like if you had like all these different factors, what we would do is try to figure out, okay, what would be the best case scenario for that student for scholarships that we can give them the most for what they have done. But then also, we also want to find out, based upon the information that we do have, will the student be able to accomplish the level of work at this institution based upon all this information that we have on them.
Okay.
In which, in some cases, like if we have college credits, we're able to see, they have some college behind them already. Okay, let's take a look at this and see how if they can get admitted.
Well, I guess I have two follow-up questions from that. First, are there many scholarships that then have certain levels of proficiency on a standardized test as part of their requirements for students receiving that scholarship?
Yeah, so some again, it depends upon the institution.
Sure.
So I want to continue to reiterate that, like, do your research. Look at the academic catalogs where they have the policies and everything lined out from year after year after year after year. Talk with the admissions counselors. The more you talk with the people and the earlier you do it, the better the opportunities you will have later down the road. So always plan ahead. But there are some scenarios where they can take a look at your high school GPA and your test scores and see, okay, how much academic scholarship can we provide to the student based upon that information. There also have been some instances, like say for instance, let's say if they do have, let's say they are transferring some credits in, and based upon the GPA and the number of credits they're transferring in, we've used that GPA over the high school GPA. And so if it's a higher GPA, then they have more opportunity for a higher scholarship. In some other cases, based upon what they have done in college, let's say that we don't require the test scores. So then all we would use is just the GPA from the college, from the credits they're transferring in. Then we'll just use that, and then if that's the best case scenario, then we'll just use that.
So it seems like there is a lot of discretion between the admissions counselor's role. I mean, that the admissions counselor really has a goal, presumably seems to understand kind of what the university has tasked him with doing, of finding students who can meet these particular criteria, and then you're assembling the evidence that's presented to see if this student fits that model or not.
Yeah, and different institutions have their admissions processes set up differently. But, as an admissions counselor, what I always try to do is try to think about, okay, how, based upon the information that I know about this particular student, what can I advise them on so that they can maximize on the financial aid they're able to receive if they want to continue through the process and then come to the school. Like, how can I advise them on what they can do? So, like, there are times like when I would talk with students, and be like, I would find out that let's say they're a homeschool student, and they've already taken some college level classes, starting from like freshman year, sometimes in high school, sometimes in sophomore year in high school. I would find out that information, and then I would advise them, okay, well, here's what you want to try and aim for. If you want to maximize on the amount of scholarships you're able to receive, continue to take these college level courses along with your high school courses and do the very best you can. The higher the GPA, the better. And then by the time you graduate, and I'll try to help them kind of see it, try to frame it. That way, by the time you graduate, you have these many credits, and then we'll take a look at this GPA, and then we won't require the test scores because you have these many credits. And then we'll take a look at that and say, okay, this person qualifies for that academic scholarship or this high amount of academic scholarship.
Interesting. Okay.
So I always try to take a look at like the best case scenario based upon the information that I have and knowing what scholarship opportunities are available for the institution. Okay. So
now, one of the frequent pieces that we've come up in researching this resolution has a lot to do with questions of race. And the argument is made that the SAT and ACT establish barriers to minorities for proving that they are capable of college level work. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that for our audience?
Oh, wow. Wasn't prepared for that one.
Yep, I'm sorry. It's a bit of a curveball question. I know.
It's all good.
But it really is the one that keeps coming up. I think the heart of this is I'm expecting students on Affirmative to essentially be arguing, we ought not do this because it will help colleges achieve racial equity. And then students on neg are going to be arguing, basically, no, we need to keep this in place because this establishes kind of a universal benchmark for showing that anyone, no matter their background, is prepared for college. Yeah. So I think a lot of this is going to come down to people arguing percentages of ethnic representation on campuses. Mm-hmm. So I was just curious if you had any thoughts about that. If not, we can move on to our last question. But
I mean, the way I like to think about it is that very well can be the case, and I personally think that there very well can be some systems that are in place that can prove that, and in which I would not be a proponent of that. But at the same time, I think one aspect of these standardized tests that I think a lot of people might forget is that there's varying there's different types of intelligence that's out there in this world. And I think like a lot of these standardized tests very well might limit what some of those different other areas of intelligence there are out there. And to say, if we just need people who are intelligent in math and in English or in writing or something like that. Like, I mean, those are very limiting areas. There's also some people who are out there who just can't take tests well. Like, there's this stress that is just overwhelming them, that a crippling anxiety, so to speak, when people take tests. That when they take tests, they're like, there's a limited amount of time. I have all this pressure. I don't know if I can make this happen. For me personally, like I was one of those people. Like, I didn't necessarily have the best SAT or ACT score. I took both. And English was always, and we were just talking about this, like English was always a difficulty for me. Mm-hmm. And you can even take a look at my statewide tests. Like, it was never a thing. But my mathematics was on point. Like, I love math.
So I was the opposite. The English was always the good side. I was terrible I was one of the few people at Hillsdale who I had to take their version of remedial mathematics because I didn't have the SAT math score. Everyone else tested out of Math 105. I was there with 3 other people. We have one of the best professors. He's now the chair of the math department, a guy named Dr. Trelaw. He turned that class into a set of syllogisms from Lewis Carroll, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland, and Euclid's geometry. Because he looked at us like, none of you are math majors.
Yeah.
We're going to do some fun math that's going to benefit you, but we're not going to try. I'm not going to try and just mess with your heads this semester, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were saying. Sorry,
yeah. No. You're good. Like I was just saying that there are some things that standardized tests try to measure. But for some people who might have different disabilities or they might have different anxieties, different things that cause vast amounts of stress that can really limit what very might be accurate. And there's some parts of that where, it might be, a responsibility of that person to try to, do better in. Like, I need to do better in English. Like, but it was just always difficult for me.
Sure.
I had to go through 2 remedial English classes just to get caught up to where I need to be. For English proficiency.
Sure.
And then I had to take additional classes. Just to meet my graduation requirements. And so there are times like where it can be difficult from time to time, but. So I think standardized tests can limit people in that way, and it doesn't necessarily measure, intelligence in all areas that other people in environment might be stronger in. So I think there might just be some of those limitations, and there also might be other companies that might be out there that might have different standards of tests, quote unquote. That are trying to combat that, and some schools, some institutions are trying to offer that.
I think that's really helpful.
There's some pros and cons to how different institutions might see that or view that. So
I think that's really helpful because I'd not thought about really the psychological harm that the testing might produce, and that really could be a really interesting argument for the affirmative side to really take that as an initial premise and then look at, well, what is the psychological harm by setting these tests as sort of the gatekeepers of collegiate access, and just how much identity are students placing in their test scores, and how much additional stress that produces negative effects on other aspects of life. I think there's a really interesting mental health impact for the affirmative on this case to say, look, if we actually get rid of this, how much we're going to be able to elevate the other parts of a student's application and help students present themselves in a better light, and also help high school students really have a higher quality of life. I think there's an easy access to that argument. Well, Thomas, my last question, and we'll wrap this thing up. I really appreciate your time today. I know you've got to get back on the road to Virginia today, but I did want to ask you, from what you said earlier, it sounded almost as if some students might want to take a bunch of AP classes to just rack up a ton of college credits. Is that a route you would advise, or no?
Okay, I'll preface this. I wish that there were, like the information that I know now, after going through school and also, working in admissions, there's all these pieces of information that I wish I knew back when I was in high school, and actually listened to maybe some of these people. There are probably things that I wish I knew back then that I know now that would have allowed me to make better life decisions for where I am now. And so when it comes to AP courses, like to your question, now I will preface by saying this. It's kind of funny looking back now, but I low key decided to go into some AP classes simply because I felt like I was in competition with my older sister Mary. But Mary was an English whiz. Like that was her niche. So, but I was like, you know what? I'm right behind her. Let me also take an AP English class and see if I can actually, score higher than she did. And that was like the worst mistake of my life. I was so stressed out, and I didn't even take the AP test for for that class.
But you took the class the whole year.
I had to. Once you signed up for it, and once you're in it, and once you start taking a few courses, or a few classes already, then that's it. That's all it is.
Yep, that makes sense.
So I was trapped in that class. I really wish I didn't do it. I personally, and you know what, schools, institutions can hate me for saying this, but to be honest, I don't really care because I don't go to your school anymore, and I'm not even in academics anymore. I think taking AP courses in the way that they market it as college preparation courses, I think can be a little baloney, to be quite honest. Now, again, take a look at your institution, see what they do, see what they advise, talk with your admissions counselor and for that school, and try and really get a take on that. But if there's opportunities where you can take actual college level classes, whether it be through dual enrollment when you are a sophomore, junior, or senior in high school, those from an accredited institution, those are better opportunities to take advantage of that rather than taking AP courses and stressing yourself out over college level work that is not really representative of college classes. One thing that really stressed me out about taking AP courses was the fact that, I took these AP classes 2 to 3 times a week. I was on a block scheduling 2 to 3 times a week, for however long within that class, like anywhere from like an hour and a half to 2 hours within that class. I can't remember the time length, but it was stressful because not only did I have these really thick, books of literature that I had to read, and then having to write a paper on and have a test on it like all the time. That wasn't necessarily like my college experience from when I took the English classes in college. And it wasn't as stressful because it wasn't something I was thinking about 5 times, every single day during the week, during the academic week. So there really was no point in taking these AP courses, stressing myself out, and getting low grades in it, because it affected my GPA, which then affected my scholarships later on down the road. And so, even though AP courses can prepare you for college, quote unquote, I wouldn't put myself through the stress when I could easily actually take those classes at a local community college or something like that and actually receive the actual credits for that can transfer right into the school. And then that way I didn't have to pay as much money in the long term or in the long run simply because I tried to work ahead. So that is one thing. So my recommendation is, as far as taking AP courses, if it's something that the institution requires, in order for you to get admitted to that institution, go for it. But if it's not a requirement, don't stress out. Don't do that to yourself. Take the easy level courses or the easier level courses. Graduate from high school with a great GPA. And take advantage of opportunities to where it will benefit you by actually having those credits versus taking a class and then taking a test and stretch yourself out over that standardized test as well. Sure.
Also run by the College Board, so
exactly.
We've got a slight monopoly on those.
Yeah, I always discouraged. Or I tried to discourage, AP testing or, like the different academies or something like that, or academy testing or something like that if it came down to it.
I know it's been something that's been on my mind this past week because I teach a lot of junior level courses and we're at a year-round school, but this week particularly so it's the last week of August and that's when the nationwide traditional calendar school starts. The AP courses that are students registered for online, those started. I saw a pretty stark difference. We've got some students that are taking taught AP courses, meaning there's a teacher on our campus who has gone through AP training and has structured the actual class to teach AP calculus at our school. And that teacher is teaching it in a daily format for 47 minutes in our because we don't do block scheduling, we do bells. But 5 days a week, 47 minutes per class with assigned homework, and it's all kind of in the standard for them, it's really an advanced level standard class. But then I've got lots of other students who suddenly they've gotten used to, for 6-7 weeks, they've gotten used to their normal homework load, and suddenly they've either signed up for 1 or 2 online AP courses.
Yeah.
That's all self-paced. It's all the assignments are preloaded. And there's some poor, overworked public school teacher who has volunteered to cover an online AP section for some stipend, who's available for 2 hours a day to respond to email. And essentially, they're now able to teach themselves AP, whatever the course is. There's a variety of them, and it's just been killing me to watch these kids do this, because on the one hand, I see them all, they want to do something good. They want to take this class. None of them are choosing a bad thing.
Right.
And there's plenty of bad things they could fill their time with. This isn't one of those. But instead, they've chosen this thing that has been sold to them as, this will give you college credit, this will make you look good on your transcript.
This will get you ahead, and this will prove your intellect for this particular institution.
I am no longer convinced that those promises are true statements, because instead it seems like I would rather see students who actually are putting that much effort into their standard courses and are really maximizing the potential to learn in those standard courses. And it from what you're telling me, it doesn't sound like it really stands out to an admissions counselor to see a bunch of APs on a transcript. If that somehow lowers the rest of the GPA, and it doesn't, those APs are not the way to get out of an SAT or HCT score. But instead, dual enrollment might be a better route to get there. That still has a strong teacher-student connection.
Right, and I always try. Now, this might be me just because I might be more, old school or whatever. Like, I really do prefer like that face-to-face interaction. I like being within the classroom, but also like that personal connection that you can make with a professor that can see it on your face and how you respond as to whether or not you are doing well or whether you're struggling, versus like an online format where almost every single online class I've ever taken, it was just like, you ain't gonna make it through. I passed, but I was just like, oh gosh, that was a lot.
Online courses are rough because so much is on you as the student. It's like your initiative.
There's so much discipline when it comes to it. Now, some of these younger students, who grew up with technology in their hand, they can handle that, and I might go for it, do it. But I personally like that personal connection that I can have with someone, when it comes to that. But no, you're absolutely right. I think that. Again, I wouldn't stress over that. If you like an academic challenge, some schools, they can probably say, oh, you took all these AP courses and you got these scores, these high scores, 3 scores, 5s on your AP tests. We'll give you these credits, for that class. Great, that's awesome. Take on that academic challenge, but don't feel pressured. That's the big thing. Don't feel pressured to take a particular class just to prove something to someone else or to prove something to yourself. Don't make things more complicated or more complex. When it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah,
it really doesn't have to be like that.
High school's complicated enough as it is. At least if you're at
high schools are going through enough in their own lives.
I know your high school, my high school, the one I teach at. I think they all had rigorous class options, and there are less rigorous options for students that are less interested in the academic rigor. But there's good options to avail for students to avail themselves of.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Are there ways that people can kind of follow you online? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Instagram? Do you want to give a shout out to anybody else here?
I'm not sure how fascinated you would be by or anything like that. Follow me on any of my social media platforms. But if you feel like you want to, and literally I'm just a regular person. It's really I don't have a platform or anything like that. But if you want to follow, or if you want,
you give good financial advice on your Facebook page, and
from time to time, I'm a financial coach. I have my own coaching business called Common Sense Solutions that I'm in a way I'm actually relaunching. all that right now. So that's kind of where I'm trying to like navigate my social media stuff.
Do you have a website that we should plug?
Not yet. Again,
all right.
We're in the building stages. But if you want to just kind of if you want to follow me on social media, sure, why not? I love people. It's in a way it's a ministry for me. On Instagram, I am at _Tomatillo _ so _TOMATILLO _ It's a nickname. And I mean, it's just random stuff on there. And then on Facebook, you can follow me on there, Thomas Starchia. That's fine. And if you have questions, like I wouldn't mind, answering people's questions through any of those platforms. By all means, go for it. But when I do launch anything else, like all the business stuff officially, then I'll be sure to connect that with Josh, and you can include it in the notes or something like that.
Oh yes, yes, definitely in the show description. I can always go back and add that in once your website launches.
Sure.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this episode of What's the Res. We hope that this episode benefits you as you are preparing for the September-October Lincoln Douglas resolution. Hopefully, our discussion today will give you some other insight into potential impacts of changing the way the college game is played. Anytime we change the status quo, it could lead to benefits or it could lead to harms. And hopefully, our discussion today points you into one of those directions for your cases. We'd love to know how this episode helped you or did not. If it didn't, we'd love feedback either way. You can reach out to us over email at whatstheres@gmail.com. You can find us on our social media pages. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit at whatstheres_, and then on Facebook at facebook.com/whatstheres. If you are like me and you just can't manage to get enough debate in your life, and then you can also check out our premium content. We do a series of debates where we record real debates by real people. Our September debate is on the resolution resolved. Political hierarchy is an inherent part of society. That'll be our 9th episode in that series. You can find those at whatstheres.podbean.com/premium, or you can go to our website, whatstheres.com, and you can access our premium content there. Those are available at $3 a month or $30 for the year. So we hope that you enjoy what we do, and until next time, work hard, speak well, and seek the truth.